professional development plans and about performance evaluations on yearly.
And are there benchmarks around racial justice as a part of that, or is it mostly around other topics?
No. Other topics.
And to what extent does the organization ensure a pipeline that seeks the leadership of people of color leaders and organizations to become decision makers within your organization?
None that I know of.
And to what extent does the organization raise resources for its racial justice work?
I do know they raise, and go out there, but I don't know of a campaign that, was specifically for that.
Okay. To what extent does your organization have policies that promote racial justice?
There are policies in place. From in the parent handbook as well as for staff.
And could you give me an example of what some of those policies look like, or what they're like?
Just like a code of conduct, ethics, things of that nature. No discrimination. The basics.
Okay. Yeah, and that was actually one of my questions. Is does your organization have an anti-discrimination policies that explicitly prohibit harassment of people of color, members of the organization?
I'm not sure if it's worded quite like that, but yes, there is an anti-discriminatory clause in the policy.
Wonderful. And to what extent is the family defined in a way that supports all family formations, including those beyond traditional or nuclear families?
Can you ask that again?
To what extent is family in your organization, like when you're talking about families, do you define them in a way that supports all family formations, including those beyond traditional or nuclear families?
Yeah, I would assume so. I mean, we just kind of refer to them, the community we serve, the families we serve.
And do you all have a definition that you use internally for families at all?
No.
And to what extent does the organization use affirmative action in the hiring process?
I'm unaware.
And to what extent does your organization have benchmarks around leadership development and retention for people of color?
I wouldn't necessarily say that people of color. It would be for everybody in the role.
Okay. And to what extent does your organization periodically assess the disproportionate impact of organizational policies on staff and or constituents of color?
I don't know that they do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And to what extent does your organization invest in building relationships with people of color leaders and communities?
I would say quite a bit. Just knowing, what we do and what we represent. That there is a lot of, leaders of color in our community that they correspond with. To kind of, partnership with and create things.
And could you give me an example of what that looks like? Or like of a particular partnership?
Particular partnership. We partnership with Smart Start right now, and the partner with that is for NC Pre-K classrooms.
Okay.
And those are basically, are a lot like our Head Start classrooms, but so there are some leaders over at Smart Start that are of color, and come in, assess the classrooms, and conduct yearly monitoring tools to make sure that we're in compliance with the regulations.
To what extent does your staff and board reflect the spectrum of people of color communities within the community? Do you feel like your staff and board is representative of the communities that you serve?
Yes. Probably not nearly as much as it could be.
And are white people in your organization supported and evaluated in deepening their knowledge and building skills around issues of white privilege and anti-racist organizing, either within or outside of the organization?
No. Not to my knowledge, no.
And does your organizational leadership have values-based relationships with people of color leaders in the region that work towards building long-term alliances, or is it mostly local?
I would assume mostly local. There's probably some larger, maybe, nationally, but yeah, us locally.
Okay. And does your organizational leadership have values-based relation? I've already asked that question. I'm sorry. I have a very long list of questions, as I'm sure you can tell. And I very much appreciate you answering them.
No problem.
To what extent are people of color on staff supported in identifying and participating in leadership development activities?
Leadership activities?
Mm-hmm.
Not many. There's not many opportunities for that.
And are those, would you say that those opportunities are, that people are intentional about making sure that people of color are well represented and supported in their opportunities to access those opportunities? Or do you feel, how intentional do you feel like that is?
Yeah, there's probably no intention.
Okay.
Little to none.
And how much space is your staff, board, and leadership provided time, resources, and structure to discuss and respond to issues of racial justice within and outside of your organization?
You said how? The time?
So, I guess to what extent are staff, board, and leadership given organizational space, time, and resources and structure, it's like meetings and things like that, to discuss and respond to issues of racial justice within and outside of your organization?
Well, they definitely are given the time to have those meetings, conduct those meetings. I just don't know that, those are actual topics for any of them.
Okay. And this is kind of the last little grouping of questions, and it is about how your organization supports a culture of racial justice, both inside and outside of the organization. So the first question is, to what extent does your organization support a culture of racial justice, both inside and outside of the organization? How do you feel like that is going, or what that looks like?
It's really not. It's not prevalent, I don't think it's. I definitely think it should be a major concern, but it's not.
And thank you for sharing that. Like I said, we're trying to figure out where the community is as a part of the assessment.
Right.
And to what extent do you feel like the full identities of people of color, so including other aspects of their identity, like their sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, immigration status, etc., are recognized, respected, and taken into consideration in the development of organizational culture?
I don't think it's considered at all.
Okay. And to what extent do you feel like the staff and board are trained in interrupting racism at organizational events and within the organization?
I would say little to no training. I think it's kind of just, kind of how you were raised, culturally, cultural boundaries or things of that nature. Just be polite, I guess,
Okay. And when the organization plans activities and events, to what extent do you consider basic needs of clients like childcare, interpretation, food, proximity to transit lines, or time of day? And what does that look like?
Can you say that again?
So when you all are planning activities and events for the families that you work with, how are you considering the needs that they might have around things like childcare or interpretation or food, or proximity to transit lines, things like that?
We're actually, this particular location is, right down the